Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank everyone for taking some time today to connect with us and be here during this workshop. Today's workshop is going to be on the topic of how to manage your job search. It'll be presented by myself, Zane Westmoreland, and my colleague, David Murdoch.
Good afternoon.
And our goal in this workshop is to really give you more of a feel, a hands-on for how to take a more strategic approach to managing your job search. And we know there's a lot of questions, a lot of ways, and we know that there's a lot of advice around how to do things like resumes and cover letters, but not a lot of information out there on how to actually structure your day-to-day job search. And we hope to cover that in this 30-minute workshop. So before we get started, I'm just going to jump in quickly into a brief overview on who we are. So at Acadiate, we are experts in talent marketing and digital portfolios, and we have over 10 years of experience working with student talent marketing. This means we've spoken to many, many successful candidates, students that have gotten into jobs, and have been able to get a lot of insights from the tactics and strategies they use to get jobs at leading employers. And we're able to take all those insights and actually funnel it into great products and great advice for you to follow to help give yourself the edge in the job market. We're also in regular contact with recruiters that represent tens of thousands of new graduate hires, and we found that our approach actually leads to a 3 times improvement in candidate assessment according to surveyed recruiters. So that means if you are just using a resume cover letter, nothing else, and then you adopt these approaches on Acadiate, you can typically see a 3x improvement in the way you present yourself, in the way that employers assess you. And we're also actively used at universities like University of Toronto, Norwich University, Brock University, amongst others. So that's just a little bit of a background on us at Acadiate. The first thing we want to look at is how most people approach job search today. And we've spent a lot of time looking at the way students approach job search, especially as they get into it the first time. And we found that the typical process looks something like this. It's simply you go to a website, whether it's a Workopolis, a Monster, Career Builder, LinkedIn, Indeed, Google Jobs, and you find a job and then you apply to it. And you generally keep doing this process and repeating it. And we found that while so many people follow this process, it's actually a very ineffective way at applying to jobs. Applying to jobs in this way, you actually end up spending a lot of time on jobs you may not really like, and you may not also be very strategic in following up on the jobs you're applying to and doing the little things that actually differentiate you as a candidate between your jobs. So there's a lot of things and a lot of better ways to structure this that can help you be much more effective in the way that you not only reflect on the way you're applying to jobs, but also allow for a methodology that builds you up over time rather than being kind of stagnant as you go from job to job. So the way we recommend approaching your job search is, number one, have a system. And a system is a plan in place or a way or a process that you can follow for each and every job that you apply for. And it's very important in this system that allows you to have a plan, that it's easy for you to track, and that it's also very easy for you to know what the next steps are at all times. We found that when candidates simply just apply to jobs or find job and apply, they're not knowing, where they've applied, what they've applied with, how they did, how far it went consistently. And when they also try to reflect back on where they were successful and where they failed, they find it actually a lot to blur into each other. Whereas when you have this system, it allows you to see where you're struggling, where you can make improvements, and how you can be more effective in the job search.
Right. In fact, actually, especially for new grads, there's a tendency to believe that applying in volume, the spray and pray type of approach is the best practice. And one of the key things that we try to impress upon people in having a system is to get into the routine of understanding why they're applying to that job and how they can differentiate themselves, to really slow things down and be more strategic and be more careful and more meaningful in presenting themselves to that employer. And so that's one of the key things with having a plan, is that it slows things down and makes you not get into the bad habits of just applying for the sake of applying, but actually applying in a very careful and meaningful manner. And that's where you can dramatically improve your the quality of your job applications and increase the likelihood of more positive responses.
Right. And one of the things, or the ways that we like to see this process, is the job search is really a sales process. What you're effectively doing is you have a set of skills, a set of talents, and you are looking to sell those talents to an employer who's going to pay you for your time. So we've actually found that it's very effective to actually borrow best practices from very effective sales approaches. Sales approaches have been well documented for hundreds of years on effective ways to sell products, effective systems to sell products. And we've actually looked at many of these systems to see which ones would effectively translate to the job market, the job search market. And one of the really effective approaches we found is actually called a sales funnel. And for those who've never heard of a sales funnel, think of an actual, like a water funnel. Your idea is to take a lot of clients or a lot of individuals in and lead them through to eventually making a sale. And here's a quick description as it was described by Entrepreneur Magazine. It says, in marketing automation, Ryan Deese, co-founder of Digital Marketer, often describes the sales funnel as a multi-step, multi-modality process that moves prospective browsers into buyers. It is a multi-step because lots must occur between the time that a prospect is aware enough to enter your funnel to the time they take action and successfully complete a purchase. So taking this framework for the sales funnel and applying it to the job market, we can write it for the job market as instead of it being from prospective browsers into buyers, it's from job leads to hires. And instead of looking to sell to people, you're looking to sell your services to employers and get them to take the action to completely make a hire. So we're going to break down what this sales funnel actually looks like and each of the steps contained within it. But we found that when we break it down in this way, it enables you to take a lot of best practices from companies that have been employing this to manage sales to hundreds, if not thousands, of potential clients. So the job funnel stages and actions. We're going to quickly go through each stage, some of the actions you should be taking at each stage, so you can get a better feel for what they are. So the first stage in any funnel is your leads. And leads are effectively the jobs you're interested. So the first action we recommend you take when getting leads into your funnel is find jobs, and we usually recommend that you work with about 15 to 20 jobs at a time. Once you've found those jobs, you want to organize them by priority, and priority should really be defined by how badly you want the job, how well you fit it, and also the urgency of the role. So if it's due very soon, then that'll obviously up the priority of it. But this is generally how you want to look at each and every job. And then the way you work this is you take the jobs that are at the top of your priority list and you work on those first and move it into the next stage of the funnel, which is preparing. So one of the first things you'll notice off the bat here is by taking this approach of collecting leads and then making assessments, you are now spending your time upfront on the best jobs rather than just the job you found first. So it becomes a much more thoughtful approach to the job market, and you end up applying to jobs that are actually much better suited to your skill set and jobs that you'd much rather have. So the next stage of the funnel is, we call it preparing. And in preparing for a job, you want to review the job description thoroughly. You want to highlight the job description similar to the method we recommended in the last workshop. And then last but not least, you want to ensure that a copy of the job description is added to your tracker or that you downloaded for yourself. And the reason this is so important is that many jobs, after the job posting date is completed, they'll pull down the job post and you won't be sure what the actual role was that they were looking for. And this can come back to hurt you if you make to the interview stage or you're going in for a phone interview and you want to have some more context for preparing for that and you can't find the job description. So it's really important that you save a personal copy of that.
Right, and part of this we impress upon students and new graduates is that there is also the tendency in today's world, it's actually quite easy to find job postings per se, you know, the Indeeds out there. There's a lot of electronic job boards where you can find job postings very quickly, and there's a tendency by everybody to do a binge of going through, spend hours and hours, go through, identify jobs. Oh, that's interesting. And so you need to have a methodology where you identify an opportunity and be able to record that you're going to apply to it, and apply to it at a later stage where you should be prioritizing around those that you know, best fit, that you're most interested in, or have a very good chance of being successful in the application process. And so it's very important as you do go through that binge exercise where you could, you know, be identifying maybe even dozens and dozens of opportunities. You've got to be able to organize that well and be able to follow up in a prioritized manner where you're not rushing through them. Because again, as we were saying, what's going to determine your success is how thoughtful, how meaningful, and the effort that you make to really target yourself to that employer. And that's best done by understanding what they're looking for, as we talked about in the first webinar last week. And so being able to track that and having that system is critical, so you stay disciplined and stay on course and you allocate your time properly to make sure that the high priority applications are done properly.
So the second step you want to take in preparing is always review the company website and also third-party or party information about the company. You next want to tailor your resume and write a cover letter. And then finally, we want you to also create a showcase digital portfolio and attach that showcase to the tracker. And once you've done all these steps, we then move on to the next step, was move the job into a stage called review. So the review stage is a stage that not a lot of candidates actually spend a lot of time on, but it's an area that a lot of mistakes and a lot of things can be caught. So the first thing we highly recommend is take some time to review your own application. Don't just rush out a resume cover letter and just send it in and then move on to the next application. You want to be very thoughtful and thorough and review your application as though you are a recruiter. And do that with the job description with it and ask yourself questions like, you know, does my application look like somebody that could do this job? Am I seeing the connection? Am I seeing the value or the relevance of my background to this role? And these important self-reflection points can help you go back and actually iterate and make improvements to your digital portfolio and to your application in general. And we see that those improvements, individuals that take 2 or 3 or 4 iterations on their applications have far better applications than those that are one and done and send it off and apply. So it's really important to take a moment to step back and then re-look at it with fresh eyes and make self-criticisms for improvement.
Right. So really what we're conveying here might sound, you know, straightforward and common sense, but what we're trying to make you conscious of is a quality control process. no different than in a manufacturing process. And where quality suffers is often because you're skipping these steps. And so it's very critical that you go through these steps with each lead and go into it in a very methodical manner, because that will drive through these habits better quality applications, and making sure that you're spending the right amount of time with the right applications, and and making sure that you're not missing anything, so that when you do apply, it's your best effort.
The next step, if possible, have a third party take a look. So a third party can be, parents, family, friends. You don't have to do this for all your applications, but we find that it's helpful early on to catch mistakes. Oftentimes, the approach that a lot of candidates will make is that they'll spend so little time reviewing their applications, they'll end up sending dozens of applications that contain the same mistakes that could be easily caught by somebody else. So we do recommend, if you can, get it in front of a third party. It's also even more helpful if you have an individual that is connected with or network with somebody at the job. It's a good way to get feedback from them, and also almost an inside edge there, that somebody internally can take a review or take a look and give you some insight on if the application hits the mark. So once you're done this part, you want to apply to the job and then move the job to applied. So one of the things after you're applying to a job, a lot of individuals, they'll apply to the job and then they'll just cross their fingers and move on to the next job. And they'll never put thought into the application after that. That's the equivalent in sales of making a pitch, but never following up on the intended audience to see if they were interested. So we think after you apply, you always want to make sure you have additional actions taken on the application. So one of those is a week or two after, if you haven't heard anything back from the employer, see if you can touch base with them and ask if they've been able to review your application. Ask them if they had any questions, if there was anything that you could do to better illustrate your fit. In doing this, a lot of employers have told us it shows a lot of hustle. And it shows a lot of passion for the job, because so few candidates actually do follow up and look up the candidate after this. The only exception to this is if you see that the employer explicitly says in the application instructions that they do not want you to follow up unless they reach out to you. But we found that more often than not, it's a good practice to get into. And it doesn't just have to be by email. You can also phone in. And we've actually found this is especially helpful for applications to small businesses where they don't have as many candidates. That personal touch can be the difference. And it can be as easy as a recruiter has 30 applications on their desk, and you're the one person that's called, that they immediately pull you out and put you to the top of their list because you're the one that's cared enough to take that step. So really, really important that you ask yourself and keep asking yourself after you've applied, how do you keep working on this job? How do you keep pushing it forward?
Right, and maybe actually just a little bit of a point there that's relevant for especially new grads. This methodology that we're talking about is structured around the typical job search structure, which is you're identifying jobs that are posted and then applying to those companies. There's also the methodology that we also encourage students, because they're often said 80% of the jobs out there are not advertised, and therefore we encourage people to phone up representatives of companies, whether it's in the HR department or somewhere else, and try and chat with somebody in that company. To find out more about it, ask for have a coffee, and find out more about the company, and say that you're interested in the company, but you're researching it. We've been told it's actually one of the most effective ways to scope out and get inside tracks, and that there's many companies that actually encourage employees to engage potential new employees around that type of activity. So, as Dane was mentioning here, after you apply, one of the things is to follow up. In the other methodology, being proactive and engaging companies is actually seen as a very assertive and shows eagerness and capability and passion. So something to think about. It's something that you should be comfortable in doing, is to try and engage individuals from a company that you're really interested in, you're applying to, especially over the long term, because it can dramatically improve how you're perceived and how they will perceive your job applications.
Yeah, and just to add on to David's point there, it comes from a place where we see that a lot of candidates are modest, maybe a little bit self-conscious, not wanting to rub anybody the wrong way, but don't really see how keeping quiet and keeping to yourself doesn't really help you get in front of employers in the way you want to. So don't feel bad about being willing to put your best foot out there and to be willing to reach out and to try to spark these conversations. The worst thing they can do is tell you they're not interested, which is usually better than what you were had in the first place. And the best case is you can spark that conversation and create a personal connection with the employer. So if you've been able to follow up, move the item or move the job into a followed up stage. If not, then you can keep it in the applied area. The next stage is the interview stage. If you can get to the interview stage, you want to obviously start preparing for the interview. And there's a lot of resources around how to prepare for the interview. We could spend an entire workshop on this, but our general advice for an interview is try to keep it more conversational, not like an interrogation, but you want to go in and have your questions as well. As much as they're interviewing you, you're also interviewing them. And be curious, and let that be the kind of the driving force for the interview for you. And again, after the interview is over, you also want to take some follow-up action on the interview. Usually what you do is immediately after the interview, you want to send a thank you message. And in the thank you message, you can also recap some of the interview highlights, which can come across as a good follow-through and leave a good impression on the recruiter or the individual that interviewed you. This is especially helpful if they are interviewing 3 or 4 people and you're the only one that followed up with a thank you message. So it's just a good habit to get into. And last but not least, one of the last stages is being hired. And this is the end goal of all these stages, is to get to this one. And the great thing about being in the job search is you only have to really land one employer at the end of the day. Although your goal will be to get as many job offers as possible, you just need one buyer, so to speak, of what you're selling. So we believe if you follow this process strongly, it will make this process a lot clearer to you, and you'll have a lot better insight on ways that you can be better at this. So a couple of things on why this funnel is so effective. The first thing is you're always able to know what's next. So we find that a lot of the times students and new grads in the job market can find themselves in somewhat of an analysis paralysis. They'll be applying to jobs, and then it'll come to a stage where they're kind of seeing or looking at the job market, and it feels like they've applied to everything. And they don't know where they're at, and so they end up getting kind of dissuaded. They feel disorganized. Everything starts to blur. By following a funnel in this process, you always know where you are, and it's very concrete in your head. You know how many jobs you've applied to. You know what you're doing next. You know what stage you're doing next. One day you can plan on, just following up. Another day you can plan on collecting job leads, and it allows you to segment your efforts so that you're far more productive. The next piece is it also enables you to become much more reflective and also allows you to more quickly identify roadblocks. So if you're consistently getting to the application stage and you're never getting to the interviewing stage, you can identify that easily when you're seeing a funnel, because you'll see that you're constantly getting stuck at applied. But that tells you where to focus your efforts. If you're constantly getting to applied but can't get to interview, then you know that your applications aren't hitting the mark, and that you have to keep upping your game in your applications, and they have to keep getting better. And that's where you need to focus your efforts over time, is to keep getting better there until you're consistently getting interviews. And then once you're consistently getting interviews, if you're not getting to hired, then you know to focus some efforts on how to better interview yourself. And a funnel really enables you to see that very clearly on a day-to-day basis almost, rather than seeing it, every couple weeks, or just feeling that, you're just not hitting the mark. The third area is that it does keep you very productive. And it also gives you a sense of accomplishment at the end of a week, or at the end of any block of time that you're working on finding a job. And going through the job search process can be a very demoralizing process. The longer it takes for you to find the job, the lower your self-confidence usually becomes. And there's a lot of negativity in this area. Having a structure like this allows you to feel a sense of control, but also allows you to feel like you've done well with your time. That, in the last week I've applied to 30 jobs. This is what I've done. Or I've applied to 20 jobs, and these are the jobs I've applied to. This is how I've applied to it. And allows you to have a lot of clarity on that. So you know exactly what you've done and what you've accomplished in the last week. And that can give you a lot of motivation for how you're going to choose to approach the next week. So now that I've given you some insight into this, I want to show you how this actually works on the platform so that you can put it into action. Okay, so usually where you'll start off is somewhere like an Indeed, LinkedIn, and you're going to be able to search jobs from wherever you are. So I'm just going to put jobs in Toronto, and I'm going to look for a digital analyst or a communications analyst role. So you can see a lot of jobs are coming up, and the idea here is to be able to go through jobs. You can go through them one by one. So there's one here at Sun Life. I'll take a quick look at it, and I can see it's a business analyst. It's Sun Life. They have the ability here to connect to it on the company site. Usually this is the link you'll want to take to it. So I'll click on this, and we'll see it load up here on the Sun Life jobs. And you can go through it here. You don't have to go through it in detail. You just skim through at this point just to get a sense for it. And then what we want to do is in our tracker, this is in Acadiate, underneath the tracker area, you'll see that you have the ability to add a job opportunity. And we're going to click that. And then you'll see, just like I just went through all the different statuses in our funnel here, we have the ability to have all the statuses here. But this is a job lead, so I'm going to leave it here. And I'm going to go through and just add the job title, the employer. So I'm going to go ahead and add the job title. So the job title goes here. Employer is Sun Life Financial. And here is where you can either see if there's a deadline. So this one is the 5th of the 5th, so March 5th, 2020, and we can put our deadline in here. So go ahead and put this in as the 5th of the 5th as our deadline. And usually at this stage is where you can choose to put the job description in. I usually would recommend you put the job description in once you move to preparing, because a lot of times what you may notice is you have a lot of job leads, and then once you're ready to start working on it, if you go to start working on it, it's no longer there. You can no longer apply to it because it's taken down. So there's a lot of things that you want to do only when you move it into preparing. But what we can do for now is just copy the job URL so that we know where it is. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that in here. And if there's a contact name, that's great. There doesn't seem to be one here. And you can add a note as well if you'd like. But for now, this is all I need. So I'll just go ahead and save this. And we can see our job is now here. Now, the next important thing you want to do is after you have several jobs, and I'll just add one more for this demo, just so you can get a feel for it. So we have a research analyst role here. And I'll go into this and apply on the site here. And this is at CAMH, and it's a research analyst. I'll just go here. We'll add this new job, research analyst at CAMH, and it's a job lead. And I will again copy the link here into there and then save it. So the idea here now is if I click on all my job leads, I can see I've got 3 job leads, and I can say my priority based on a 5-star system. So if it's something I'm not really interested in, I'd rate it as very low. If it's something I think is one of the best jobs, what I really want, I could rate it as very high. For this, I'll put this somewhere in the middle. Sun Life one, I'll put it very high. And then what you can do is simply approach these jobs based on the order of what you're most interested in. So usually what you do is you go on a, let's say a Monday or Tuesday when you're starting, you load up about 15 to 20 job leads, and then you choose the one that you like the most and move that into preparing. So when that's moved into preparing, we can go across our preparing and we can see all the jobs we're currently working on. So right now I'm working on these 2 jobs, and then this is where you can start working on these things and actually moving it through step by step. So let's say we use CGI and we're moving it into review. So it's now going to be in review now. And one of the things we want to do, as I mentioned, you can attach your showcase to it. We can actually go back in here. We can attach a showcase to it. So I'll say I used a general showcase and save that. And the other interesting thing you can do is after you've reviewed it, after you've applied, you can also write in comments on it. So you can say, I applied today on April 22nd and had a confirmation number of 1, and then save that comment. And this allows you to have a track record with each and every job that you apply for. So that's just a high-level overview of how this actually works in action. But you can see how it allows you to have a bird's eye view of everything that you're doing, what you're saying in each, and how to more strategically approach this process using a funnel-like capability. So just to recap, we want to first show the benefit of following a systematic job search structure is very crucial to effectively managing your job search. Your approach should always help you plan, track, and know the next steps. And that's really something you want to ask yourself. Whether you're using Acadiat or any approach you're taking to this today, you want to ask yourself, am I taking an approach that helps me plan, track, and always know the next steps? And we know that if you do take these steps, you will be ahead of 80 to 90% of those who are also applying to jobs. And using this approach, what we've actually found is that individuals that spend more time on each individual application, therefore increasing the quality of each individual application, actually find jobs far faster than individuals that use the spray and pray approach. That is to say, you're probably better off applying to 10 to 20 jobs at a high quality every week than 100 jobs with a generic low quality application, especially for the higher end jobs. So that's it for today's workshop. Dave, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, other than to say, again, we're trying to convey here best practices process that makes the job application process very methodical for you, slows it down so you can be more careful in your applications and more insightful and be better positioned in your applications. And the beauty of that process is the more you do that, you're typically also better prepared for interviews. A lot of people talk about, interview process. Well, that comes from carefully researching the company, carefully pulling together a very thoughtful application, and then documenting it so that when you do get the phone call, you're better prepared to engage that employer. So we're trying to give you some best practices. That is a process, but also built into our platform, which is available in our basic account as well, for free for users. And hopefully this will dramatically improve your job prospects, which constant feedback that we have from our users that it does. So we just want to convey these best practices and help you be successful in your job searches and your career aspirations.
Awesome. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and we hope everyone has a great remainder of the day and remainder of the week. Thank you, everybody.
Good day, everybody.